overwhelming research now shows a clear link between gut health and migraines. Whether it's the 5% link or the 95% link, the studies are now coming out over the last 5 years. We've known some of this for 20, even 30 years. Back in the 1990s, the studies were starting to come out. But the studies now aren't just showing that there is a link and the possibility of link, which I'm going to show you, but like I'm going to show you at the end, also that there are some possible solutions. By working on the gut, you can improve migraine severity and symptom and medication use. And the studies are now coming out showing that. But the first clear picture is migraines aren't just one condition. There's a number of different types of migraines, and there are a number of different causes and factors in there. So some people are going to have a really good benefit, other people are going to have a mild benefit. But the great thing about working on fixing the gut is that it repairs and helps lots of the other conditions out there, all the metabolic conditions linked with migraines, by the way, for example, insulin resistance and metabolic syndrome, hypertension, all those conditions, as well as all of those other chronic illnesses and conditions there. So it's a win-win situation. Now, something like 16 or 14 to 17% of the population suffer from migraines. Women 3 times higher, which may suggest there's some estrogen in there as well, linked in there, which we'll talk about. And of course, it's now classified as the most debilitating condition for under 50-year-olds. So certainly something that we can look into. And the answer is, hang to the end, because we're actually going to give you some of the solutions that they're working on in the studies now. We can even take it further. But the first thing that's very clear is everybody has heard about the gut-brain axis now. And that's been well established for the last 30, 40 years, and everybody's been talking about it, and it's how they link together. Now, I want to make it the gut-brain migraine axis, because working on both of those, and we can actually start to come up with solutions for migraine. But the first thing that's clear about the gut is that it has a huge potential role on neuro conditions. Conditions such as mood, anxiety, depression, even hunger and anorexia are clearly linked to gut health, because there are all these chemical messages going up there about hunger, and they're coming from the gut. And there are all these messages out there coming about stress, and they're coming from the gut. Then you've got the long-term conditions, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, including multiple sclerosis. So we know these conditions are. So the first part here, I want to open your mind to the idea that if these are, then possibly your migraines are too. And as a result, working on the gut, we can start to fix it. And the first part of the evidence that comes up is when you look at all of these gut-related conditions. As far as I can tell from the research, what's been done, all of these gut conditions and more are linked directly to migraines. So if you are a migraine sufferer, you're more likely, dramatically more likely to suffer from diarrhea and or constipation, dyspepsia and reflux, gastroparesis, which is when the food seems to get stuck in the digestive tract around the stomach and so on, and doesn't seem to go down, which, by the way, suggests something to do with melatonin and the neurotransmitters. That's some little bit of trivia that I talk about in my other videos. And then we also find that we've got IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. And people with migraines tend to have literally a 2 to 2.5 times, that's 250% times higher rate, and vice versa as well. So if you've got IBS, you'll have more migraines. If you've got migraines, you'll have more IBS. And some of the symptomology of that, the conditions that relate as well as skin conditions and so on, also show up in IBS and both migraines. Then you've got celiac disease, and now there's a little bit of research coming out on gluten sensitivity as well. We'll wait for that one. And interestingly enough, Helicobacter pylori seems to be a potential big player in all of this as well. So Helicobacter pylori is this bacteria that became famous 30, 40 years ago from some West Australian researchers who discovered it was in the gut and it was easy to control. And now we know that this one, which is in a lot of people's guts, a lot of people's stomach, it leads to ulcers and a lot of other conditions, and for other people it goes asymptomatic. They don't even notice it. But Helicobacter pylori has been clearly linked many times. I think it's about 400% higher rate in people who have migraines, and then finally Candida, which is a fungi. And that's often associated with a white tongue and thrush and all these other conditions, as well as other fungal infections. So all of these are some of the likely gut conditions that people who have migraines are much more likely to suffer. So as a result, it's very, very clear that there is an association between migraines and the gut. Now, the next question arises, how? And this is a brief summary of some of the biochemical processes that are going on and the messengers that are coming out of the gut that go around the body. Now, there are literally hundreds of chemicals coming out of the gut. So some of the mechanisms, the biochemical processes that affect migraines produced via the gut include things like your endocrine hormones, things like estrogen. We are all aware that estrogen can play a big role in migraine symptoms and severity, particularly in menopausal migraines, particularly in menstrual migraines, but also just in the regular up-to-date, and hence the link between women having higher rates of migraines linked in most probably, in, well, at least majoritively, with estrogen. Then you've got your HPA axis, hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal axis, and that's adrenaline and all of the excitatory messengers that are going around the body, or calming messengers. Neuroimmune system, which is basically your immune system, which is linked around your gut. So the vast majority of your immune system is actually in your gut. And if you are in a chronic inflammatory state, then it's probably coming from your gut, the dysfunction, the dysbiosis of the gut. And as a result of that, you're producing inflammation, which goes there, and there's a very, very clear link that inflammation is a key player in migraines, as in oxidation, and that's coming from the gut. We've known that for almost 130 years now. So a long time ago, 120 years, I'll say. So we've got inflammation coming there. Then we've got a list of neurotransmitters. These are chemicals that are produced in the gut and or altered and sent to various organs that are then producing them and improving them and recycling and reusing around the body. And the first one that shows up very, very clearly is serotonin and melatonin. Now, I've got this tryptophan here, serotonin, melatonin, because tryptophan is converted into serotonin, and then serotonin, under the right conditions, is converted to melatonin. So it shows you how it gets there from the food you ate. Tryptophan is an amino acid. And so serotonin is obviously one of the calming messengers in the body. It helps you relax a little bit. It used to be called the smile, the happy one. It's not really, but it's a nice positive one that you want as much as possible. And that's the one that they try to treat in with depression. Then you've got melatonin, which everybody knows is a sleep neurotransmitter, neurohormone, but it's much, much more than just that. It's what we call pleiotropic. It has an impact all through the body. Every single cell in the body is one way or another altered directly or indirectly from the melatonin. And your gut produces something like 400 times more melatonin than your pineal gland. So my message to you is simply, if we feed the gut, look after the gut, we get the right serotonin and melatonin. And melatonin, by the way, also helps everything move through the gut. So when you've got conditions like gastroparesis, dyspepsia and reflux, even constipation, we see that there is often a melatonin link in there. And that I show you in lots of the other videos that I've done on gut health, which I would suggest you check out the other videos I've got on gut health, because it will give you a much, much deeper understanding. And of course, because you want to resolve your migraines, you want to know as much as possible about the gut. And as I've said, once you start to fix the gut, you start to fix lots and lots of other related health conditions. So we've got the serotonin and melatonin, and then you've got GABA, gamma-aminobutyric acid, which isn't produced in the gut, but it's actually literally the directions are given to be produced from the gut. And then you've got glutamate. GABA is the calming, another one of these calming inhibitory neurotransmitters. Then you've got glutamate, which is primarily from our food and fermented foods, and glutamate is a much more stimulatory, and hence a lot of people will say they can't have certain foods that are fermented foods, for example, which may stimulate the migraine severity or symptomology. Then you've got other ones like acetylcholine, just the chemical messages that go around the body are again altered via the gut and recirculated. So the gut has so many roles. There are hundreds of chemicals coming out of the gut. Cholesterol to make the vitamin D, which is an antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, and can help with migraines as well. So there are all these links and indirect links, and it would take a huge amount of time to try and just unravel this picture. But what we do know is if we work on the gut in some really simplistic ways, which I'll show you at the end, some strategies that have been shown that work and are successful in the studies, and we hopefully can go beyond that, then what we can hopefully do is reduce these signs and symptoms and working out, and I don't have to try and convince you with a big board with lots of lines on it. Then you've got a whole raft of neuropeptides, and these are like your amino acids, and they go through the body and cause everything from vasodilation to vasorelaxation, a whole raft of, again, other things. They're linked, for example, with hypertension, and hypertension is clearly linked in some cases with migraines. So we've got all these links. Then you've got a raft of these special ones called short-chain fatty acids. And these short-chain fatty acids are very, very special because they have really strong anti-inflammatory, they're neuroprotective, they are gut protective, they actually build the gut wall, and interestingly enough, they are produced from the fermentation of fibers in the gut by the right type of bacteria, which we'll mention later. And the main ones are butyrate. There are studies now showing that butyrate as a supplement can actually help with migraines. Now, where does it come from in our body? It comes from the fermentation of the right type of fibers throughout our whole colon. Then we've got propionate and acetate, which are other chemical messages produced. Acetate, by the way, is acetic acid. You would know that as vinegar. And what we see is that these can have a role throughout the whole body. And it's like all conditions. There is not one solution, one little bit. It's this complex myriad of lines and networks. And all I'm trying to say is if we fix that gut, we start to work on the gut, then we start to resolve lots of the issues, whether it's the 5% or the 95%. And then finally, your gut has a major role to do with nutrition and vitamins and minerals. Now, with B vitamins, it actually helps produce B vitamins in the body. Certain B vitamins are produced literally in the gut, so you're getting more of them. Your digestion of everything from iron and magnesium, they're not produced there, but they're digested and made available for absorption into the body as a result of good nutrition. To understand the links between poor gut health dysbiosis and migraines, what you're going to do is look at the triggers, the associations, and things that actually improve migraines in the studies. And there are so many studies coming out now. They put together an absolutely fantastic picture. But if you look at the triggers, you've got alcohol, red wine, not good for the gut no matter what way you put it. Red wine also has sulfites and histamines, which probably play havoc as well. And then you've got caffeine, MSG, nuts. And nuts, well, nuts are rich in an amino acid called L-arginine. And L-arginine is one of the things that is converted to nitric oxide with the help of the microbiome in the mouth and the gut and so on. And it then goes on to cause vasodilation in the veins. And we all know that vasodilation, that is an expansion of the veins, is linked with migraines. Then you've got aspartame, nitrates. Nitrates are a strong gut poison. You find them in lots of the preserved meats, bacon, salamis, all of those type of preserved meats have lots of nitrate. Gluten, well established as a link with celiac, but also with people who don't have celiac disease can also react to gluten. And one of the videos I did a while ago was all about the gluten picture and the fact that it causes inflammation in the gut, and as a result lots of other conditions, and obviously gluten shows up as one of the triggers in migraines as well. Aged cheeses, fermented foods, and here you've got products like glutamate, and glutamate, as I've already highlighted, is a stimulant, and as a result of that can lead to migraines, and we get them in fermented foods, chocolate, and then we've got a couple of other ones. Stress, by the way, plays havoc with the gut. You didn't realize that, did you? But it's a gut-brain axis, and stress can actually shut down the digestion, increase IBS, IBD, all the gut-related illnesses. It can increase the risk and severity of reflux, a whole raft of all those conditions. So you can see again the link between stress, bright light and sunlight. Well, I don't even have a link there, but I thought I'd put that one in the triggers. Then we go to what are the associations that show up to do with possible links with the gut and migraines. And then we find, obviously, the one I've already highlighted, gut disorders. And I went through extensively showing a very, very strong link there. You've also got allergies, and your immune system is basically located around your large intestine. And a lot of the migraine-related studies now are linking migraines with immune system conditions. So what we've got here is the allergies linked with the gut, linked with migraines, for example. Obesity, like the gut, increases in inflammation. And then you've got metabolic syndrome. Here, insulin resistance and hypertension. And again, there is a strong link between both insulin resistance, hypertension, and the gut. And what people don't understand, that if we work on one part of the body, the gut, we start to actually fix lots of these things. And one of the studies I'll talk about later will show that. Mental health conditions, again, that gut-brain axis, poor sleep, melatonin, which I'll refer to in a moment. Melatonin is fantastic for sleep, but your gut produces 400 times more melatonin and serotonin than up here in the brain. So if you want to feel good, you want to feel happier and you want to sleep better, it all comes back to the melatonin, serotonin, tryptophan link I've already highlighted. So sleep, medication overuse plays havoc with the gut-brain migraine link and increasing the risk of migraine. And of course, virtually every medication has an impact on the gut, and about 99% of them have a negative impact on the gut. So the more medications you use, the more you poison the gut, and antibiotics are a classic example there. Estrogen, we see estrogen, and estrogen is actually metabolized in the gut. So you may have estrogen, ladies, you may have low estrogen or too high estrogen, but one of the things that controls it in your body, apart from your age and your status around about menopause and so on, is the gut. And it's able to recycle the estrogen and use it and create it, make it more effectively. It actually also alters the estrogen receptors in some parts of the body, particularly the gut. And it also converts the plant-based nutrients into estrogen-like chemicals, what are called phytoestrogens. So low estrogen can actually be modified, and I'll show this in one of my other videos on menopause and what you can do. But basically estrogen is altered, changed, modified, and made available in the gut. And so you can see the gut estrogen migraine link. Again, inflammatory diet. Here are some of the nutritional studies that show up. And the inflammatory diet is basically a measure of how much inflammation the food is probably contributing to your level of inflammation. And migraine, without any doubt whatsoever, is an inflammatory illness. So what we want to do is lower the levels of inflammation. And the studies clearly link in this stage progression that the more inflammatory foods, for example, omega-6 fatty acids, white processed foods, all of those things, sugary drinks, the more of those foods you consume, the higher the inflammation, the higher the inflammation, the higher the migraine. There is a very strong link in the studies. And these studies are all 2022, 2023, so all very recently. A low diversity diet showed up. And the low diversity diet is basically saying, if you're eating just a small range of foods rather than a big range like the hunter-gatherer did 10,000 years ago, then you have at a greater risk of migraine. And this basically meant things like, and the things that showed up in some other studies, I thought I'd put them in here, things like cornflakes and white bread, by the way, are associated with migraine. Why? Because they're a highly, extremely processed diet, low biodiversity, and what we want is the biggest possible diversity in the diet. And for the last 20 years, I've been educating people, if you want a good microbiome, you want to make sure you eat a big biodiverse range of foods. So the greater the range of foods, not processed foods, but the greater the range of unprocessed foods, the greater the biodiversity in the gut, the healthier the gut, the lower the migraine, and so on. And I'll show you again further links in a moment. And then finally, there was a very recent study that I've come across, and it was all about, again, 2023. And these are big studies. Some of 20,000, 30,000 people, and they look at them and they break it all down into component parts. And in this study, they found that if you had mild malnutrition, now, when people think of malnutrition, they think of maybe some developing countries or poor and war and ravaged areas. Well, we've actually got malnutrition in all our Western societies. It's also called undernutrition, where we eat highly processed foods all the nutrients have been taken out through the processing, and we think that's food. It's not food. It doesn't have the nutrition. And so this was a big US population of the study. And what they did was they found that if you had mild malnutrition, and the malnutrition was based on the response your body has through your immune system. So in other words, malnutrition related to an effective immune system. And your immune system, inflammation, migraine, gut link. So it's clear here. So mild malnutrition, and this was probably over 50% of the population, had a 72% increase of the migraine sufferers, and so on, 72% increase in the risk of migraines. And then you've got moderate. So if you had moderate malnutrition, you had a 480% increase in the risk of migraine. And then if you had severe, 392% increase. Now you might say, why is that the decrease? Probably just because of the numbers in the actual studies, but it's very clear. It was a very clear link in the studies without any doubt whatsoever that malnutrition is linked to migraine. And as a result, malnutrition, by the way, obviously, it's more biodiverse, feeds the gut, keeps a healthy gut, keeps everything working again. Gut malnutrition, nutrition is critical in this link. Then we go to a whole raft of other issues that have been shown to increase health and well-being and decrease migraines. Migraine severity, duration, frequency, across the board. And so the first one is physical activity, and I won't go into that in detail, but there are literally dozens and dozens of studies on the role of physical activity in reducing migraines. And you're probably also not aware that physical activity has a really big impact on your gut microbiome. Isn't it funny? Everything seems to come back to it. And if you eat a little bit of junk food and are physically active, the physical activity counteracts the poor diet just a little bit. So physical activity is critical for a healthy gut microbiome, blood flow, cardiovascular disease, reducing your risk of all chronic illness and so on. So we need to get out there and be physically more active. But when it comes to looking at nutrition and diet, the studies show that a Mediterranean diet, a DASH diet, which is one that helps lower blood pressure, a keto diet, and by the way, I have my own hypertension, high blood pressure program, which is much better than the DASH diet because it's based on a lot more studies. And if you subscribe and look at the videos below, you'll see that there is this information I'm saying here works for so many health conditions. That's what's great about if you're working on the gut. For example, you lower your risk of hypertension and insulin resistance and the risk of diabetes type 2 and so on and so on and so on. It's a win-win-win situation. And so we go to the DASH diet, which lowers hypertension, the keto diet. The keto diet is about a higher protein, lower, in particular, processed carbohydrates. And again, repeating this type of information, the keto diet, and all of these through and plant-based diet with phytochemicals and polyphenols lower the risk of migraines and lower the severity and duration by about 30%. Now, again, imagine you're doing that with some of the other things I'm mentioning here and the last part where we talk about probiotics and specialized programs, then imagine what it's going to make a difference to you and other migraine sufferers. And so this information about the good diet and this information about the diet part here lead to other studies. And some recent studies showed that fiber. Now, fiber is probably the single most critical food for good gut health. And it's not any fiber. It's not just any fiber. It's about getting the best type of fiber that's going to work all the way along your colon and give you the maximum benefit. So what you're after is a combination of fibers, and the studies have fairly consistently shown that 10-gram increase per day in fiber. So the average person probably consumes about 10 or 12 or 13, and they should be up to about 35, and the hunter-gatherer had 40 or 50 or 60. So if you increase by 10 grams a day, now that's not much, and very inexpensive and easy to do, and quite delicious as well, you decrease your risk, severity, duration of migraines by about 11%. Now, I think that's worth it if you think how simple it can be. And of course, when you increase your plant phytochemicals and polyphenols, then you're going to do this as a part of it anyway. Studies show that B1 and B3 are critical in terms of migraine sufferers. The studies show that lower levels are related to it, and use of vitamins B1 and B3 are beneficial in migraine treatments and so on. And one of the things about B3 is that it's absolutely essential for healthy mitochondria. And mitochondria dysfunction is another factor linked with inflammation and migraine sufferers. And mitochondria are the powerhouse of the cells that give you the energy to do everything, from thinking to acting to moving, everything. So we need to make sure they're healthy. And lots of factors in there I've talked about in my other programs. Gut health plays a critical role in terms of improving mitochondria. And then you've got minerals like zinc and magnesium that show up consistently with migraine sufferers. Not everybody is going to benefit from a supplement with magnesium or zinc, but the studies consistently show that they're low in migraine sufferers, and as a result of that, when the clinical trials have been done, they show that zinc and magnesium improve migraine frequency, etc. Then you've got coenzyme Q10, CoQ10, that is renowned. Again, it's a mitochondrial antioxidant, and it's potent in terms of reducing the oxidation and inflammation. Melatonin, my favorite. The studies there show 3 to 5 milligrams of melatonin reduce the incidence and severity duration of migraines. Now, melatonin is not just for sleep, because we know sleep is linked with migraines. We also know melatonin, though, is linked with your mitochondrial healthy functioning. It's a potent antioxidant around the body, potent anti-inflammatory throughout the body, it has so many benefits throughout the body. And again, where is most of it produced? In the gut. But unless you're eating the right foods in the right combinations with a healthy gut microbiome, it's not converted from what's called a tryptophan, an amino acid. It's not converted into what you need. So we need to make sure that the gut microbiome works with the tryptophan to create it so that you've got more melatonin. And of course, melatonin supplementation does work. And then finally, there was a trial, again, another 2023 study showed that NAC, N-acetylcysteine, vitamin C and vitamin E in combination. Now, I put this down in the bottom and I asterisked it and put it in a slightly different color just to highlight that the studies are now starting to look at combinations. And they're seeing the better of these combinations, the greater and more effective it is. And some of these combinations are now also done with probiotics and other gut supplements. And that's what we're looking forward to now. The last couple of years, the research on probiotics has turned around in terms of its influence on migraines and overall well-being and health. The real evidence now comes from when you look at the gut dysbiosis, the state of biodiversity in the gut, and the fact that it's not as biodiverse or the right type of microbes in the gut. And while the studies show this convincingly around the world, dozens of studies show this, where we get to the nitty-gritty information is the most recent studies are showing that there's a decrease in the butyrate producers. Now, butyrate is one of the short-chain fatty acids I've already mentioned and talked about, and it has wonderful, wonderful benefits around the body. It comes from the fermentation of the right type of fibers throughout the colon with the right microbes in there. And people with migraines and an increase in migraines, frequency, severity, duration, all have lower numbers of these butyrate producers. Wow, okay. So how do we get them? Hang in there, hang in. You'll find that in a moment. And then you've got also even specific microbes they've identified in a 2023 study that show that these microbes really appear to be linked, because there was mathematical modeling of all the information available. These microbes in the gut, bacteria, are linked with an increase in migraine. So they're identifying specific bacteria now. So there's a lot of work to go there, but at the end of the day, it's really showing that there is this very, very clear link. The next level down, though, you've got Helicobacter pylori, which is a bacteria that we've talked about already, and it's linked with an increased incidence, significant increase in incidence of migraines. And when they do the Helicobacter pylori treatments, you have a significant decrease, even in people who aren't aware that they've got Helicobacter. So most people aren't aware that they've got it until they get reflux or ulcers or stomach-related conditions, and they go, well, I better check this out, and they get it checked out. And so the treatment is actually shown to be effective. Now, the great thing is, yes, I have a video specifically on treating Helicobacter and building the gut at the same time. That's one of my videos that I'm sure you'll want to check that out to see what you can do. because it doesn't rely on a short-term treatment. Again, it's a long-term sustainable treatment about rebuilding the gut microbiome and getting rid of this bacteria, or at least bringing it back into balance. We also then find that there are studies on germ-free mice. These are mice, they're not germ-free, so to speak, but they are free of all of the microbes in the gut. And they give them high-dose antibiotics and they wash them through and wash them through and wash them through. And they find that those mice, when they get rid of them, actually increase pain. And so again, and these are the mice that they use as models for migraine. So they have specific, what are they called, mouse models for migraines, and they use these and pain goes up. Then we get even more convincing and we do what's called a fecal microbiome transplant, FMT. There's also a wash microbiome transplant for humans and so on. We talk about it. And essentially what they're doing is taking some poo from one person or one animal or animals, and they're transplanting it into other animals, at least in the experiments. Now they do use this process for a few gut conditions in humans, but my preference is always to work from the top down, not from the bottom up. And the studies show that when you have a human with migraine and they take the poo from that person, they put it in the mice actually develop migraines. Wow. Hold on. So we know if we get some migraine sufferer with poo, yep, it converts to the mice, and the mice actually, now this is repeated in lots of studies when they do, for example, all types of conditions from diabetes and hypertension. So it shows a very, very clear link. But they also, when they have humans with non-migraines, so normal, healthy, the population that doesn't have migraines, and they put them in the mice model, so they get the mice who have the migraines, and they put them in the mice with migraines, and the migraines go down. Wow, that's pretty convincing, isn't it? Now, I'm not recommending a fecal microbiome transplant, as I said. I'm talking about the evidence here that shows that we need to work on our gut. Now, here is the convincing, absolutely convincing studies now that are showing up just in the last couple of years. Even though we've known the gut migraine link for the last 20, 30 years, the studies are now being done double-blind, placebo-controlled studies with all the bits and bells and whistles. And they're basically showing that the probiotics and symbiotics, probiotics plus prebiotics, are working extremely effective in reducing the signs and symptoms and severity and medication use in people with migraines. Now, what's great is that the first data I'll give you, I've got 3 or 4 here, daily. People for 8 weeks, migraine sufferers, 8 weeks were given a 14-strain probiotic, and these are all different, a little bit different. So you'll see how it can alter a bit and have some benefits. But 14-strain for 8 weeks, 1 daily supplement, and a decrease of frequency, severity, and the urgent medication use. So that's pretty, again, convincing, isn't it? And this was with a couple of dozen people. There's another study where they did a daily treatment with probiotics and 7-strain, and it decreased the frequency of migraines by 25%, worthwhile having, and decreased medication use significantly. And another study, again, these are just in the last couple of years, probiotics, this one I put up because it's a little bit different, probiotics, vitamins, minerals, and herbs. And I won't go into all that because I've already shown you how lots of the vitamins and minerals and other plant-based things that you can use for migraines, and I'll show you that in some later videos as well. But this was a 12-week, and they had an 80% improvement in quality of life and more than 50% decrease in pain for the migraine sufferers. Now, what's interesting here is these are 8 weeks, 7 weeks, 12 weeks, and so on. Imagine what would be going on in your gut if you were doing it for 3 months, 6 months, a year. In fact, the program I'm talking about it's a lifelong program, because when you fix the gut, you fix all these other issues out there too. And you start to realize what it's like to be healthy and have the energy and not the migraines and not the pain and not the arthritis and all the other conditions. And then finally, this one was a probiotic and a prebiotic. So a fiber type material that works in the colon and stimulates butyrate producers. And some of the probiotics would have been butyrate producers like the lactobacillus and bifidobacteria. There's a hint there, Saccharomyces. And what you've got here is a 12-week program and a 70% decrease in the frequency and a 4 times decrease in pain meds. So that's literally a 400% decrease in the pain medication. It also led to a decrease in gut conditions like inflammatory bowel conditions and so on, and a decrease in leaky gut. So it's a win-win situation. Now, I should mention that there are studies that have also been done on people with migraine and IBS, and when they treated the IBS, the migraines started to go down as well. So we see very clearly that there is this strong, very strong relationship between the gut-brain axis, migraine, and it all combines. So what we want to do is build in a program that's going to look after you, look after all of your health, and obviously reduce the severity of migraine. Don't expect miracles. This won't happen overnight. What we're talking about is introducing a program now that's going to work for a long period of time. And it's a long-term gut health program. And I'd actually say it's a lifelong program, because I think we constantly need to work on our gut because of the various stresses that lower the good bacteria and destroy that biodiversity. And it involves probiotics, combinations of probiotics, prebiotics. There is no set group, but it is lots of the lactobacillus and the bifidobacteria, the ones you get in most of the probiotics, in higher doses, and postbiotics. Postbiotics are literally the probiotics that have been killed, but they've still got the materials that do the benefit in there. There's no studies on that, but I actually believe there are a couple of studies being done at the moment. So in the future, we're going to be looking at postbiotics too. And then what we're after is increasing the gut biodiversity foods. And these are the things that are going to constantly improve and keep feeding the gut. If you're taking probiotics, one of my little sayings is if you're taking probiotics without feeding them constantly, then you're sending them on a suicide mission. So what we want to do is not just feed them with the prebiotics and probiotics, but make sure the foods are all in harmony with the biodiversity of the gut, increasing the gut biodiversity. Now, there are many, many videos I've got up there. There's more than 50 videos just on various aspects of gut health and how to build gut health and how to look after gut health after antibiotics and how to get the best of your probiotics. I'll give you links below to some of the other videos I have there, which will be worthwhile, because again, you'll see reinforcement of what I've already said, but also extra steps and some of the names of the bacteria that will be beneficial for you. For more information, an outline of the program and some of the reference, check below.